Today's session is really meant to be just a helpful tips and tricks session. I'm not going to tell you how to organize everything in your life, just give you a little bit of a story about how I learned to be organized. Fun background on that, I did a training session once that evaluated my personality type, and under stress, I resort to organization as my primary action. So I'm a bit lucky that way. Hopefully you guys can learn from what I learned and don't have to learn the hard way like I did. So I'll tell you a little bit more about why I learned to be organized, but frankly, it was born out of necessity. I'll give you tips about scales of organization, some systems you can use. Jerome is going to help us with his digital planner system, which is now in the ETRO templates. And then we'll talk a little bit about, frankly, the software and tool side is the least important. If you take anything else from this presentation, just take the basic principles. So if you guys don't know me, I've been in architecture, buildings, and construction since 2005. Most of my career has been on the design or design build side. I did start in construction before I came to ETRO. And when I was running projects, I initially started as a project assistant in 2005, right after I graduated university. And as I progressed through my career up to a manager, I was generally doing small things. So YVR, International Rivals Area, was one of the things I did in the first 5 years of my career. A whole ton of tenant improvement projects. Then I got into industrial and mining and did a whole bunch of buildings around those. I worked on the Evergreen line and was responsible for all the substations and the other support buildings. There's a staff office and the maintenance yard out in Port Moody. Those are the kinds of things that I was working on and coordinating. I made a shift to a new company. Again, I started with the TIs. We did a couple of banks. I did finish up a Stong's grocery store. So this is all relatively small stuff. And then in 2016, I was plopped into a failing project of 400,000 square feet. It did not have clear owner's project requirements. To give you an example of things that the owner had put in their project requirements, they stated that the entire steel structure was to be stainless steel. So you can see what kind of battle was going to be fought in order to get something actually built and functioning for them. It was a very urgent project. They had sold their previous location and needed to move in here with a hard date because the developer they sold to had very large penalties in terms of money in case they were late. And because of the nature of the building, it was a large international team. So I was put as the design manager at the epicenter of this massive project. And having only really managed small things before that I could keep in my head, it was completely overwhelming. So I had to very quickly figure out exactly how I was going to manage this huge project with a huge team and a huge amount of information and keep it all together on the rails, because it was not something I could just keep in my head anymore. So what I came up with was a scales of organization, was break down all of this work into smaller pieces that I could manage and then put them all together, and you saw the whole project at once. So it really starts honestly with your schedule, understanding the project deadlines. Then I would put things in work buckets, manage your meeting notes, it's a huge part of it, and then have a weekly plan and a daily task list. So work buckets, what do I mean about that? So again, I'm going to talk to the project that forced me to figure things out. Understanding what it is and how the information flows was important. Now, you don't have to spend the backup time. I can get a little insane with understanding how things work. But basically, a whiteboard with the deadlines that you see every day. What are the pieces that need to come together to hit those deadlines? So in this specific instance, I literally had the program portions of the building that I needed to figure out because the owner's project requirements weren't there to get them into the design and get them constructed. Work buckets are especially helpful for complex projects or for working on multiple projects at once. So this has completely translated over into what I do now. managing our strategic initiatives. Because I do need to look at everything as a whole system of all of ETRO, but it doesn't do me any good to stay at that level. I break it down into, okay, we have our people plan. Okay, we have the pre-construction plan. So we break it down into those things, and there's a lot of interconnections and interrelationships, but frankly, you don't need to worry about those as long as you break it down. If you have a really long to-do list, it is overwhelming. So this is why I put it in buckets. When you can see one bucket getting done and another bucket doesn't really have anything checked off, you know you're not balancing your time between what needs to get done for that deadline. So on the bottom left here, this is a photo of a cardstock graph paper. So my boss at the time, she used these things. Every project had their own piece of graph paper because she was managing, 10 to 12 projects at a time. And each of those graph papers had the task list that had to get done, and they were literally pinned up on her board. So I just did the same thing. I had my buckets of work for this project, and for each of these buckets, I put the task list. It allows you to keep everything visible, which is a huge help. It also allows you to kind of know where you're spending your time because you're checking the things off that you've done, and you can prioritize them. A pro tip that I have learned since being forced into figuring this out, you should always have one of your work buckets be your own career development. If you aren't purposefully driving your career ahead, you may be lucky and have the opportunities pop up because they're just there, but it should actually be something that you do plan and work on an ongoing basis. So that was the work buckets and understanding your deadlines. Again, I'm just going to go back to that for a second. Have the whiteboard, have everything written up there so you can see exactly what's going on, and then figure out a way of having tasks lists that are organized by topic or by work bucket, as I call it, and make them shareable, frankly, especially as you're working in teams. Now, your weekly plan and your meetings, these are very intertwined. So I'm actually going to start talking about meetings. And on the left, you see a photograph of my meeting notes. And this was literally, at this point, I did everything on paper. So don't think that these tools require any digital tools at all. You can do everything by paper and be completely organized. That's the way the world's worked for generations. So it's totally fine. So set up your meeting notes in advance. This means you need to know when your meetings are, who's going to be attending, and what you need to do to bring to that meeting. I tried a combo planner and notebook. So you can see on the left, there's a couple of pages from a blank notebook so that you guys can understand what I'm talking about. So on the left, I have my week plan. This has hours of the day, every day underneath, and you could just block out in there, these are the meetings that are coming up. And then you have a separate page where meeting notes are. I would honestly literally write down which page of the meeting notes we're on. Now, understanding that this is only one page meeting notes, you have to be flexible and figure out exactly what works for you. But I found this notebook really helped me on this project. Once you have your meetings figured out for the upcoming week, then what are the things you need to do? What are the things you need to prepare for those meetings? What are the things you need to prepare for your next milestone? What are the things that are, like, say, what RFIs do you need to answer? What sort of submittals are you reviewing, etc.? I would then put in the work that I'm planning to do across that week, and I always allow at least 1 to 2 hours of gaps in my day, because there's always going to be something pop up that you didn't expect that you have to spend time on. So for instance, my days, I plan ahead. So yesterday I came into work with a specific plan of what I need to work on. Mike came to me with something that needed to get done immediately. So I had some time in my day where I was able to take that time and spend it on Mike's task and know I was still going to get the other stuff that I was going to do that day completed. If you don't have something pop up, there's always tomorrow's work that you can add into today. I always include dedicated time for checking email at the start of the day. For email management, I highly recommend Allison's ETRO use session she did last year. And digital notebooks are more beneficial because they're searchable. My paper was great. I had absolutely everything in there that I needed to know. But I learned quite quickly that going back and finding stuff got difficult. So I personally, being a very electronic digital type of person, adopted digital notebooks. There's a lot of benefits to them. If you're not comfortable with that, honestly, it's not a big deal. Make sure that the pages of the meeting notes are written in your calendar so that you can look in your calendar plan and say, okay, I had an OAC meeting for 8:37 BD on Tuesday at 3 p.m. and my written notes are on page 52 of my notebook. If you have those two things, it's really gonna help you. But let's learn more about digital planners. This is a digital notebook with a template set up by Jerome. So Jerome, if you could have this one, that would be great.
Thank you. And thank you very much for actually giving me the opportunity to talk about this stuff. And you can't really see me, but that's okay. There we go. I too appreciate trying to be organized. That's one of my favorite things. So actually, if I might just try to share my screen briefly. Share this window. Perfect. So first off, I must give a lot of credit to Natasha, who was here previously, and she actually shared a 2-second lean on this kind of digital planner that I've really kind of developed to fit into my workflow, but it's quite flexible, has a bit of a pre-con context, but I can kind of run through it. Effectively, it's one spot for all notes on a project, from the very beginning to never kind of leaves our hands. You can kind of see on the left, I just dated things with the date that it occurs, and then have like a little subtitle for that specific meeting. Do some, I think, something nice and flashy on the front for yourself to keep you excited about the project that you're working on. But really, what I've done is each page, each entry, using subtitle and just a free form for notes, and it can be a variety of something that's informal, whether it's just a conversation that I'm having with a sub trade, or something that even requires a little bit more structure with a little bit of an agenda. I can use the agenda in there, share it with an email if it's an external thing, or even if it's internal, I can include the digital planner within the invite so that the team we can collaborate on the agenda, make sure everyone's on the same page. The minutes go on there, and it continues to live on in this document. I found it to be very, very helpful, especially on some of the pre-con projects. I might get a call from, say, a Vin or Kyle Thompson about something that's happened 1, 2, 3 years ago. And yeah, there's certain things that I might know off the top of my head, but I can just do a quick Control F and see everything that's related to the elevator hoist beam depth at a UBC quite quickly. So it's quite simple and versatile. And one of the things that I've done is keep the most recent information at the top, so you're able to kind of continue to progress through and have everything that you need all in one spot. I'll go back. This is a slightly older version of it, but in UBC one of the things that we did, and this is partially a pre-con thing, where we have certain meetings that we weren't running through Procore because it wasn't appropriate to at the time, and even having those within this document and being able to break the agenda in there, take your meeting minutes in there, and even have the next entry further on in the document, printing things directly from here, having different. You don't need to get into this level of detail if you don't want to, but even having page number and function for that set of meetings. So it's very flexible. You can include not just for yourself, but for your project team, so that everyone's on the same page. You can all collaboratively take notes together as well. And as Karina mentioned, we do have it right here in the template gallery. So there is a nice little template there it's quite simple. You can make the landing page your own. There's this nice little quick access links, which is just a table of contents that you just need to refresh whenever there's new entries. And I generally just copy the previous one up above so that you have your entry information and you can just kind of make it your own and grow as the project goes on.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jerome. It is a really great tool to have everything in one spot. I think I heard a hand go up. Nope. Okay, so back to the bigger context. So please do, if you're comfortable with digital tools, I recommend starting to use that digital planner, especially on a project basis. You might have to discuss as a project team who's going to start it for you specifically. But if you're not working on something that you need to collaborate on, you can also just use one for your own notes. I have a similar version that I use for myself for just all of my strategic initiatives meetings, and I'm able to then extract and send out stuff on a case-by-case basis as it makes sense. So a little bit more about your weekly plan and daily tasks. So we've covered everything about meetings, but consider your deadlines. What tasks do you need to get done and what days that make sense? And you do want to try, if you have a meeting on one topic, try and have the tasks that are related to that meeting lined up for the same day. The reason being that when your brain is thinking about one thing, it's much easier to continue flow if you just have that thing be what you're working on. If you're working on submittals and then after your submittal meeting, you tell yourself that you're instead going to work on your career plan is going to take you some time to get up to speed because your brain is in submittals mode. That being said, that's not always achievable. You're going to have some interruptions. Make sure that you just know achieving flow is great. If you can do so, trying to set it up for yourself. If you can't do so, accept it, and you're not going to necessarily be as productive. Do leave time for things that pop up. Your task list is going to grow. After each meeting, you likely have some new things you have to work on with new dates. I would always take my action items and add them to the right work bucket list immediately after a meeting so I don't forget. So don't necessarily wait for somebody to issue minutes. You've taken your own handwritten notes or your own digital notes, take those actions and make sure they're on a list so that you know you're going to do them. Depending on your role, 60 to 80% of your time could potentially be planned on a weekly basis. On our sites, we have weekly look-aheads. You guys know what's coming. You don't necessarily know every little thing that has to be done to get those milestones hit in that week, but that's okay. You do have those things you're working towards. So plan those ahead. What are the things you need to bring to site? What are the things you need to order from CCEC to get those things done, etc. Every day, when you start your day, look at what's on your plan and adjust as needed. This might sound like a lot to do this prep work, but frankly, it takes me no more than 5 minutes a day to just look ahead, make a couple adjustments, and start working. So now we'll touch on a couple of tools. I am only talking about the things today that ETRO already has and pays for. It's not going to go beyond. So Google Keep, if you want a digital list of tasks, Google Keep can do this. This is an extract from my Google Keep. I don't actually use it for managing my work, but I do use it for keeping little things that I can't forget linked to the work bucket they're related to. So on the left, you see tags. These are things that I've tagged: ETRO way updates, general strategy, Google tips. What are the things I need to remember about Google Sheets? So I have something in there. I don't actually have to work on it. So this is how I use Google Keep differently. But many people set this up so that you are putting all of your tasks on a list, sharing it with the team. Everybody can collaborate and you can check things off as they get done, and they're all tagged by what they're related to. This was really easy to set up. This means that if there's information in your head and you've put it out there and shared it with your team, it's not stuck just because you're away sick or something else has come up and you have to give it attention. There is the opportunity for someone else who has a little bit of float in their day unexpectedly to pop in and do something. The drawback with Keep is there is no scheduling ability here. So you can't really have dates in here and do deadlines, which is a drawback. but it is really great for reminders. And if you're sharing a task list with someone, I do think this is a really great way to do it. Another tool is Google Tasks. So for this one, I'm going to pop over to another tab in here. So actually, I'll just share my screen with the presentation for now. Google Tasks is this button on the right. So when you open it up, it has, again, work buckets. So if I want to look at my in-progress tasks, they're right here, regardless of what I'm working on the left. It does not have any contextual intelligence, but it does help. So if you are in your email, you can click and drag something. Another way that you can use this that I find very helpful, because when you are in Google, Google Tasks does not have its own application. It's always embedded in another Google application. But B, it reduces your screen size. So I've started using this thing called Tasks Board. If you've ever used Trello or Microsoft Planner or those kinds of things, this helps you to turn Google Tasks into something more similar to that. You are able to put deadlines. If I clicked on this one, there's details that I can put in there. So here's how you add date. You can add a label to it. So you can have additional context. You can attach files directly to it. And you can also add a subtask. So if there's 3 or 4 things required to get this done, you can add those as subtasks. Now, if we go back to understanding this, you cannot share Google Tasks with other people. That's the advantage of keep over tasks. The reason why I use tasks a lot more is because I like to be able to automatically pull things in. So, where did my screen go? Let me share this one. So here's an example of some of my meeting notes. There is it's called a chip from Google for action items. So I've got all the action items for this meeting in here. And you'll notice as I hover over it, I can assign as a task. So when I do this, it takes that action item right out of my notes. I type in the person who has to do it, and I say the day they have to do it. And I hit assign as tasks. That's now popped up in my task list right here. So that makes it really easy. I don't have to duplicate data entry or anything. It just pops in. I then click it done when I'm done, and it goes into the completed bucket. You can also click and drag an email. So basically those are the 2 things that I find really helpful: clicking and dragging emails and creating tasks from action items right into your Google Tasks. There are a whole bunch of other tools out there. Those of you who work with me on strategic initiatives know that I use Asana. It is specifically for team usage, and it does not replace Procore at all. So if you want to use Asana, your manager and you have to agree, and then we can implement something. So while there are some teams who are looking at adopting it themselves, but it is specifically meant for teams collaborating. And you may not need anything as comprehensive as Asana for your own organizational usage. A little bit of advanced planning. So if you've got your tasks lists and your notes and your daily plans really figured out, there's the next level. So if you do some reading about tasks lists, they're great, but they don't necessarily indicate how long it takes to get something done or the level of effort to get something done. So some very famous, very rich people use this method called time boxing, which I use as well. And this is taking your last list of tasks and assigning specific time and duration in your day. So you can sort of do this in Google Calendar. You can enable tasks. So under your calendars, click off this one called tasks right here. And then anything that you've assigned a date to in Google Tasks will show up on your calendar, so it's a reminder. This way of doing it is limited because you can't actually say, okay, this task is going to take 4 hours of my day that day. It's just going to sit there as a task that has to be done by, say, 2 p.m. on Thursday. So I've used some other tools like Sunsama and Reclaim. Again, this does not have to be electronic. If you use a planner that has the hours of the day indicated, time boxing is literally drawing a box around the hours and writing the task in the middle, saying these are the hours that I'm going to work on this. Yep, focus time in Google Calendar is really great. It shows up in your calendar, and you are using that time for focus work. Thanks, Dara. The only thing is that focus time doesn't necessarily indicate what you're working on. It blocks the time out of your calendar, but you would have to manually figure out how to say focus time for, I'm working on a BC Hydro proposal. You can also connect your calendar to notebooks directly in Google Calendar. When you set up a meeting, there's an item here, take meeting notes. So if you're using the digital planner, this doesn't quite work the same way, but it is good to kind of figure out a mishmash of the two so you can have all your notes for the one meeting, but this will set it up so it has all of your attendees, your project or meeting name, and your action items and your notes set up so you can just type it in. You can use something called Zapier to automatically create these meeting notes for you. If you want to know how to do that, let me know. It's fairly easy and it is free. But the important thing there is to have your calendar set up correctly. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to help you with them, and other organized people on the call can contribute your ideas as well. This is just some tips and tricks. By no means am I the master authority of the whole thing. Go ahead, Vin.
Thanks, Korea, from Jerome for the awesome presentation. Just curious, from Jerome, for the Google Doc, have you put some sort of limit? I know it's an online thing, but was there ever a limit, or you have this very slow up to point? Because that document can get very long.
Are you talking about limit in terms of users or just document length?
Document length.
Yeah, document honestly, it hasn't ever really been an issue for me because now that I kind of work chronologically forward so that whenever I'm working on a new thing, it's just at the top of the document. So I really just going to page 3 or 4 like every day. It's really having the ability to do a control F or to search for older things or to even like hyperlink something from an earlier meeting that makes it accessible. The way I have it structured now, the length is not even a consideration before when I had the new stuff at the bottom, it was annoying. But the way I have it set up, it works really well. Pretty.
Thank you.
Any other questions from anyone? Okay, hopefully this is helpful. I suspect you'll probably want to just review the recording because this was a lot of information in a short period of time. And there's a few very basic things that you can get started with. My door is open if anybody wants to hop in and chat for the afternoon or tomorrow. I'm here to help you, and I can just bounce ideas off of me for what you're trying to organize, okay? Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks, Karina.